Welcome, everybody, to the Google for Startups live session on innovative leadership. My name is Marta Kropinska, and I have the pleasure of leading Google for Startups in the UK. And today I am joined by a very, very special man. But before, as we wait for many of you to join, we would really like to know is where you're joining from. So something that this new remote world has created for us is an opportunity to really connect with startup communities, not only in London or in the UK, but really throughout the globe, and connecting to communities of all of our colleagues that work at Google and Google for Startups, supporting startups around the world. So we'd really love to hear from you where you're watching this from today, as we wait for a few more to join. And whilst we're waiting, I'd like to give you a little bit of a background on the man that you'll be hearing from today. A fantastic friend and supporter of Google for Startups. A person who has definitely been incredibly helpful to me and the companies that we've been supporting. Craig is a director of strategy and operations at Google UK, Ireland, and Southern Europe, I believe. And to essentially what that means, a strategy and operations director, sort of think a mix of COO and CSO roles. Craig is fantastically prepared to lead that function, having spent more than 16 years in Accenture. Although you definitely don't look like you would have spent anywhere 16 years, but I'm sure lots of fantastic learnings there, and now in Google for just shy of 3.5. But outside of that, Craig is also a great supporter of the startup community, an angel investor in 5 companies, and also Craig has his own record label, which is very exciting and shows the breadth that he's got. On a fun side note, great fan of fantastic, colorful sneakers. Unfortunately, we're on video, and I'm not sure, Craig, if you can do splits to lift your foot up and show what you're wearing today.
I can't get my legs up.
But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, I look forward to all of the wisdom that you're going to share with us today. So thank you. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Marta. What a wonderful introduction as usual. And thank you, everyone, for joining. I see somebody from Raza from Lithuania. I saw somebody joining from Kenya, somebody from Turkey, somebody from Gaza, lots from London there. So we've got and Cairo. Hello, Moody. Okay, so we've got a really international crew with us today. Thanks so much for joining us in this weird and wonderful time for business. I'm going to be talking today about innovative leadership, and I think it's a topic that is more important in the sort of COVID-19 period than in any period, certainly in my lifetime. And I'm sure you're all navigating that in different ways. I'm going to talk for about 30 or so minutes, so I'll try and stay on time here. Before we look forward, though, or even into the present, I want to take you on a time journey with me back in time, just over 50 years ago, to this iconic image. Actually, there's 2 images here, one overlaid on top of the other. But it's a great reminder, isn't it, how technology has advanced over the ages. And although this is the image that tends to stick in one's mind from 1969, the moon landing, I think what was even more interesting at the time was what was going on back here on Earth, where the men and women of NASA at the time were flying most of this mission. The astronauts flew only a small part of it, but these are the people who were responsible for mission control and controlling the mission. And there they are with their IBM shirts on. Do you see that on their backs? Sitting in front of what passed as a supercomputer of the time, right? These were the supercomputers. And what's fascinating to me about this is these supercomputers were less powerful than the ones that we carry around with us in our pockets today. I don't know if you can see that. I'm holding up my smartphone, my Pixel phone, by the way. Very good phone. Isn't that interesting how technology has advanced in 50 years. And actually, if you look at the pattern over time, there's a very interesting progression. Just 35 approximately years ago, modern computing, became affordable. So you didn't need a whole room like the people at NASA did to have a personal computer. I think the Macintosh came out in 1984. So that's a reasonably short period. And then the internet, as we know it, just over 20 years. So Google was born in a garage in California in 1998. The technology, of course, had been around a lot earlier than that. But the usable internet really only about a 20-year-old story. The smartphone, of course, launched by Apple in 2007. And we'll come back to that story. And boy, it's now the ubiquitous device that lives in most of our pockets these days. And then machine learning, aren't we at a moment in time on that? Artificial intelligence. Really only, although the computer science has been around for ages, the practical application of it has really only come about in the last 5 years, because compute power and the ability to handle these sort of petabytes of data have advanced. And then, of course, last year, a team from Google, I'm proud to say, made a breakthrough in quantum computing and achieved what was called at the time a quantum singularity. So they're a supercomputer that was quantum powered, as opposed to sort of the standard model of ones and zeros and small transistors and processors, was able to solve a mathematical problem in 200 seconds that would have taken the most powerful supercomputer in today's world more than 10,000 years. Do you spot the pattern? 50, 30, 20, 10, 5, just last year. So what's happening here is two things. One, increasing compression cycles of innovation. That's thing number one. And thing number two is it's in the hands of all of us, isn't it? Like this gentleman here. And that's developed a new set of expectations, hasn't it? We expect immediacy, we're curious, we research before we take decisions, and we expect things to happen very quickly. And some companies in this context of digital evolution and revolution have absolutely thrived. And I'm sure that's true of many of you who are attending today. You probably many of you are tech-based businesses. But for some others, it's been super difficult. So let's start by looking at some of the examples of who's found it difficult, and then I'll come on to some of the success stories. Here are a few logos that you may recognize. Let's start on the left-hand side here with Nokia. Nokia in 2007, remember that's the year the iPhone launched, had more market share of the global handset market than all of the other handset producers at the time put together. They were absolutely dominant in that market. I remember having a 6210 Nokia, the little green screen, and it was just revolutionary. It was wonderful. The battery lasted about 25 weeks, and you could text on it, and if you had a really flash one, you could access the internet in a pretty clunky way. Yet today, Nokia doesn't exist, at least not in its handset manifestation, other than a few IP licenses, right? And keep in mind, this was a company that started in forestry. It made rubber boots, and then, as you do after rubber boots, changed itself into a global giant in telecommunications. So this was the best of the best, right? These were the best people in the world, and probably at the time, the high watermark in innovation and innovative leadership. Yet today they don't exist. Toys R Us, very similar. Along comes the internet, and if all you're offering is aisles and aisles of range and selection and a distribution point, with the internet, you don't kind of need that, right? You can get it easier and quicker online. And I certainly lost many years of my life wandering through Toys R Us with my boys, buying various selections of plastic tat. But Toys R Us was another example of a company that was quite innovative, but yet succumbed to the forces of change. And then Blockbuster was the go-to place. If you wanted home entertainment on a Friday night or wherever, whenever, you would go down to your local Blockbuster, you'd get a DVD and probably an oversized bag of popcorn, and you'd take that home. And I'm sure there are lots of equivalents in different countries that you're attending from. You see Pasquale there from Rome, so hello, Pasquale. Yet Blockbuster, of course, succumbed also. Now, here's a fun fact. Blockbuster in, I think it was 2001, had an opportunity to buy Netflix for $50 million, I think it was, and they passed it up. Whoops. Not such a fun fact to you if you were at Blockbuster and missed that opportunity. Another fun fact, by the way, Netflix was started by a person called Reed, who got frustrated because he was fined $40 for returning his DVD to Blockbuster late. And he thought, well, surely there's a better way. And actually, the first instance of Netflix was a mail-order DVD company. Of course, now it's the global streaming giant that I'm sure is in many of our living rooms on this call here. So why is it that these iconic companies with the best of the best leadership succumbed? They didn't see what was happening and failed to change. What's going on here? Well, my argument is that these companies and all of us here are battling thousands and thousands and thousands of years of human evolution. That probably sounds cryptic, and it's intended to. Let's test that in this room. And usually I do this live, so play along with me here. I think we've got something like 250 of you. So play along with me here. I'm going to show you a slide, the next slide that comes up. That slide is going to have two parallel lines that look like that, and each of them have arrowheads on them. And as soon as you see this slide, be honest with yourself here. As soon as you see it, pick which one is longer, which line is longer. 3, 2, 1, here it comes. Did you pick? Right. Mostly when I show that slide, people say they're the same. Did you say the same? Come on, the honest ones of you, you can put your hand up in the live comments here if you're brave. I did too. I tricked you. Actually, our minds tricked us. One of the most wonderful things about our human brain and human evolution is that we've become incredibly efficient decision-making machines. And the way our brains operate is that we look for patterns that we think we recognize in order to make speedy decisions. And this is an evolutionary trait that's innate in all of us that has kind of kept us alive over the years. The sort of desire to find the familiar, the pattern, recognize it, and to act quickly. I see some of the oh shits. Yes, it's the first one, bottom one. Some of you got it right, but usually I think if you do this in a large audience, almost always it's 60 or 70% say they're the same, and your mind tricks you, and that's because of this sort of human evolutionary trait. So this is what companies are battling. This is what all of us individually are battling when it comes to coping with change. What an interesting time to be talking about that now. So human evolution has hardwired us to see change as danger, to look for patterns that are familiar because it's safe. And when the game changes in the most subtle of ways, these companies that I just talked about before failed to pick it. Or if they did pick it, they picked it too late and they changed it too late and they succumbed. The good news is that there's also another uniquely human thing that we can all rely on, and that's called imagination. So let's talk about a few examples, and I've tailored this to COVID-19. These are some of my favorite examples of the active use of imagination and incredibly innovative pivoting that's happening all around us, everywhere in the world, as we are sort of navigating this very uncertain time. I'll start with the top left and I'll work clockwise. So the top left is a company called Crosstown Donuts. It's in many countries around the world. They have a sourdough-based donuts. It's very delicious. I do recommend them. And of course, they have physical distribution. That doesn't work in a lockdown period. So what they've done is they've teamed up with a local bakery, a local vegetable supplier, and a local dairy supplier, and they're now boxing up their products and delivering those to the door. And we get a weekly goodie bag there, which is absolutely delicious. So that's called Crosstown Collective. For those of you who live in London, check them out. The second example, this gentleman who's sort of looking around there, is a guy called Nick Heath. Nick Heath is a live rugby commentator. And of course, like most live events, sport is not happening at the moment. Live rugby commentator do when all of the sporting events are cancelled. Well, Nick is an absolutely hilarious guy. Please do go and search him on YouTube when you're done with the session today. Nick has taken to commentating on everyday life. So he'd go to the park, obviously, in a socially distant way. I think he filmed a lot of the material before full lockdown, but during COVID. And he started commenting on mundane things like adults pushing prams around the park and kids playing with a dog or a ball. And his overlay commentary is absolutely hilarious. And on the back of that, he's built this really large YouTube following, and he now hosts a pub quiz on a Saturday night. So a great example of a live rugby commentator pivoting, using his imagination to apply his craft in a different way. Top right, there's a great, anyone from Canada here? Anyone from Canada, please shout. It's probably a bit early in the morning there. This is a Toronto restaurant called Clooney. And Clooney's a fantastic French bistro. I've not been there, but it's certainly on my list. And like many of the high-end restaurants around the world, Clooney has reinvented itself as an online high-end grocer. So now you can go to Clooney's website and you can order the baked goods or the salads or some of the proteins that customers used to get when they went to the restaurant. So a great example of a pivot. Signature Brew down the bottom left here. For those pub fans, obviously pubs are closed, will be for some time, I imagine. Signature Brew has come up with this concept called pub in a box. So you order it online and you get this wonderful array of craft beers delivered to your door. And then that comes with a specially curated Spotify playlist. So you sort of click a QR code to visit that. So you get the tunes as well. And it's actually being delivered by musicians who are currently not performing live at the moment. So they're your delivery people, socially distant, of course. And there's a pub quiz that goes with it. So a great example of the pivot there. And here I'm going to make the dangerous and courageous move of trying to experiment with the technology here that I haven't used. I'm going to try and play a video segment. But this is my very favorite example of the use of imagination, sort of to overcome that pattern recognition. Live music. So live music, of course, these days is largely is a really big and important revenue generator. A lot of the big musicians make most of their money from touring and festivals and things like this. All of the festivals and live concerts, quite rightly, have been cancelled in the current times right now, and that means that musicians are having to reinvent the way that they express their talent and also monetize. This one that's showing on the screen right now is a guy called Travis Scott. Travis is a rapper. He's based in Austin, Texas, quite big at the moment, and he was due to headline a festival called Coachella. Coachella, like all of the festivals, have been closed, and you'd think that would be quite a disaster for Travis in terms of his plans for performance this year, but not a bit of it. What Travis did on the 3rd of April, so very recently, is he created actually it was 3 concerts, one of which was on the 23rd of April, created a concert inside, a live experience inside the Fortnite gaming platform. Fortnite, for those of you who don't know, it is a sort of first-person shooter. It's an online game where you can sort of experience and play with others and so on, experience a virtual landscape. And gamers within Fortnite noticed that in a bay on Fortnite Island, a stage started getting built. And of course, then the announcement came. Travis Scott indeed was going to come and he was going to perform live. And you could tune in and watch it live. And during the period of this concert, everyone, the game rules were suspended. The various sort of weaponry and other sort of emotes were replaced. So you had a choice between a flaming microphone. As a gamer, you could do this, or you could do an emote, which was a sort of headbang, and literally just follow Travis around as he performed music and went into different spaces. It started on the island, it then went underwater, and it ended up in space. Who would have thought that this would be possible, first of all? And second, this was the biggest live concert in history. So on the 23rd of April, Travis Scott performed in front of 12.3 million people, concurrent users online watching this. And over the period of the 3 concerts he did, I think it was over 5 days, 27 million people tuned in for that. And since then, the number is building really rapidly. The replays of this are approaching 30 million. And prior to this, the biggest, the record for the biggest live concert was 225,000. So from 225,000 watching live to 12.3 million concurrently watching live. And I'm going to play a little excerpt. I won't play the whole thing, but I do encourage you to go check it out afterwards.
Oh, that's how we already know. Oh, yeah, man, I'm back up on the boom. About to turn this section in the final road. Told her I've been, you coming too. In the 305, treat me like I'm Uncle Lou. It's like the top off, it's just a road. She said, where we going? And I said, the move. We ain't even make it. I get those goosebumps every time. Yeah, 712. It's tight, yeah, it's absolute, yeah. I'm back with boom.
So you get the view, right? So an incredible example of innovation. So all of these 5 are examples of companies in the current COVID context who are undertaking breathtaking exercises in imagination, creativity, and innovation. And it's not just them. This is a pattern. I started earlier by talking about the moon landing and the technology revolution. If you look at the change of the top 10 companies over the period of 10 years, you notice that there are very few. In fact, there are 2 in both the left-hand list and the right-hand list. So what's happening here is increasing compression cycles in innovation. In other words, change that's happening more rapidly. And some companies are succumbing to this, and others are thriving from it. And the difference between them are those who are trying to find patterns and sort of follow the familiar, if you like. I've seen this before, I know what to do. Think about Nokia. And those who are being really sensitive to the signals and are exercising innovative leadership and pivoting what they do. So my message here, the sort of core message in innovative leadership is this thing called imagination. And in a business context, imagination is creativity that is applied in a valuable way. In business, we call that innovation. But just remember, it's that switch, that sort of countervailing switch that deactivates the kryptonite of pattern familiarity that entraps so many. So I want to leave you here with three takeaways. So how do you get this culture of innovative leadership running in your company? The first lesson here is you've got to create a mindset of relentless restlessness. Now I'm showing a picture here of the All Blacks rugby team. The reason I'm doing that, there's two reasons. First of all, as you may have noticed from my accent, I'm actually a Kiwi, and of course I have to talk about the All Blacks. It's sort of in our passport conditions whenever I talk publicly. So this is the All Blacks. The second more important reason, however, is that the All Blacks is not only the most successful rugby team on a sustained period over the last 100 years, I'm talking, not only the most successful rugby team in the world, but the most successful sporting team of any sport in the world. They've got the highest win rate of any sporting team in any discipline. And this is a team from a nation of 4 million people, only half of whom even qualify to play men's rugby. They've got fantastic women's rugby as well, by the way, now. So how can this be? How can this tiny team from a tiny nation buried in the bottom of the Southern Hemisphere sustain such over-indexed performance over such a long period of time? Well, they have this rule. One of their rules is, wait for it, when you're on top of your game, you change your game. I'll say it again. When you're on top of your game, you change your game. So it's this mindset of restlessness, this relentless restlessness to reinvent yourself. And I think that mindset is more important today in the age of COVID-19 than it has been in any previous time. Second thing to leave you with, second technique, play. Right? This is about creating an environment in which your people feel free, excited, and rewarded by this sense of playfulness, this hijinks that comes about when you release imagination, corporate imagination in this case, and creativity, and encourage innovation, because innovation is a function of risk-taking, right? We don't know the answer, and we certainly don't know the answer today, but if you don't try, and if you don't sort of test and iterate, we won't find what works. So creating the environment in which this can be a repeating cycle of hijinks and playfulness is absolutely critical. At Google, we regard playfulness as a tool. You know, the brain somehow behaves differently when it's feeling playful, and approaching serious things serious things playfully and playful things seriously, if you see what I mean, is a key part of innovation that certainly I've experienced. And then the third and final lesson is look up and look out. Ask the audience, right? We're all consumers, all of us, and all of us are business people as well, at least on this call. And never before has it been easier to go and ask the audience to experiment with these courageous ideas you and your employees have, and get feedback in real time on what's working and what's not. And I would say almost all of the conversations that I'm having at the moment with our partners and our customers have this character to them. It's about reading the signals in real time on what consumers are looking for, whether they're business to business customers or business to consumers, and responding in a really agile way. So asking the audience is the third question. So a summary for those of you who need the reminder: what's innovative leadership? 3 tips to leave you with today. Change your game when you're on top of your game. Second, play. Create this environment where it's psychologically safe to have a go. Try, iterate, scale, or change. And then third, ask the audience. Ask the audience. Get feedback on your ideas, on the sort of imagineering that's going on in real time. So I think I'm on about 26 minutes. We're right on 15:30, at least here in London. So I'm going to stop there and hand back to my trusty colleagues to direct us from here.
All right, fantastic, Craig. This was awesome. Thank you so much for the learnings. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Thank you for being part of the Google for Startups community. Craig, thank you for supporting us. Hope all of you are finding innovative ways to deal with the new situation in which we are in. This has definitely been food for thought. So have a fantastic afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you are. And yes, please take some time, literally 2 minutes, to leave us some feedback. If you haven't checked into the event, please do. It really helps us to know how many people we can support with sessions and events like this. And yeah, thank you for tuning in.